First images of Ukraine's Trembita cruise missile that can eventually reach Moscow have been published. Deputy Prime Minister for Digital Transformation Mykhailo Fedorov presented the first photos of the homemade, cost-efficient cruise missile, Trembita. According to the declared characteristics, the basic version of the missile weighs 100 kilograms, its warhead, thermobaric or high-explosive fragmentation, is 20 kilograms. The range of destruction is more than 140 kilometers, while the speed exceeds 400 kilometers per hour. The flight altitude ranges from 30 meters to 2 kilometers. The missile uses gasoline A-92 and A-95. At the same, the decoy of Trembita has been demonstrated at an exhibition. This version is a projectile without a warhead. Its flight range is up to 200 kilometers, warhead weighs 20 kilograms, its speed is 150 meters per second. At a price of just $3,000 for the decoy version and $15,000 for a fully equipped model, Trembita cruise missile can run on regular gasoline and is much cheaper than most Western alternatives. The development of the cruise missile is part of Kiev's efforts to ramp up its domestically produced missiles to enhance the army's strike capabilities.
Russian dictator Vladimir Putin disgraced himself by publicly telling about the breakthrough of the Russian armed forces to the Sumy region. This operation turned out to be a failure. The Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group was destroyed. The Russian Z Resource Northern Channel, which is associated with the Russian armed forces, spoke frankly about this. He accused the commanders of the Russian armed forces of setting up Putin. According to Z Channel, there have been several attempts to break through the border into Sumy Oblast recently. None of them were successful. The fighters of the 83rd Brigade have been visiting Sumy Oblast relatively regularly over the past month. In mid-January, 10 of our fighters were captured there, then actively distributed this video. Recently, they also went to Zuravka, which is 400 meters from the border. The guys did not return from there. Our group of the 83rd Brigade entered Sumy Oblast and was destroyed, the Russian resource wrote. He specified that the 83rd Assault Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces was tasked with breaking through to Sumy region and cutting off the Ukrainian Armed Forces logistics routes to Sudza on February the 15th to the 18th. The task was not completed. At this very moment, the 810th Marine Brigade north of Kyiv is conducting an assault. This is a real setup. The Marines were pretty badly battered, but they were also transferred to that area. Nothing good can come of this. What are they reporting to the president? Z Channel wrote. It should be noted that Putin's words were also refuted by Dmitry Likovy, an officer of the main communications directorate of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. He noted that the Russians tried to advance across the border in the Nikolaevo-Daryino-Zuravka section. There, they were met by the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and the enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group was defeated. There is no reason to panic, the officer assured. The head of the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Andriy Kovalenko, said that success of the Russian armed forces near Kursk, which the military reported to Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, does not actually exist. There is no large-scale offensive of the Russian army in the Kursk direction. Kovalenko, commenting on his words, reported that last night a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group tried to penetrate the Sumy region. They were met by the Ukrainian armed forces and destroyed. He specified that enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups regularly attempt to break through the border. The Ukrainian defense forces now have to fight them. A group of Russian troops that would be capable of carrying out a large-scale offensive on Ukrainian territory does not exist at the moment. Putin's information about a large-scale offensive by the Russians is a lie, the head of the center assured. Since the beginning of Putin's army's invasion of Ukraine, US President Joe Biden has managed not only to support Kiev, but also to gather allies from more than 50 countries around the world. However, after Republican Trump returned to power, the picture changed 180 degrees, reports Politico. In just 1 week, Trump has managed to make the worst nightmares of many Ukrainians and Europeans come true. The actions of the head of the White House have undermined relations between Europe and the United States, which has been on a solid foundation since World War II. European leaders are now dealing with a US that is skeptical, if not hostile, toward Europe. Trump made it clear that he believes Ukraine itself is to blame for the war being waged on Ukrainian soil. Trump's statement shocked even the most loyal US allies in Europe. One European official said Europe now faces two threats: Putin, who wants to destroy it, and Trump, who appears to want the same. The day before, Trump called Zelenski a dictator who does not want to hold elections and who does not care about the outcome of the war. Trump was already hostile to the Ukrainian president before returning to power, and now he is even more so. Experts note that during his first month in office, Trump threatened the EU with new taxes, accused the continent of lacking democracy, and sold out Ukraine even before negotiations with Russia began. Recently, representatives of 4 parties in the European Parliament issued a declaration that the EU can no longer rely on the United States. Trump again stated that there will definitely not be a third world war under his presidency, although in his opinion, the world is moving towards it. Speaking about the global conflict, Trump recalled the situation in Ukraine and the Middle East. In a conversation with the press, he noted that there are wars going on in different parts of the world, but he wants to act as a peacekeeper since he does not accept bloodshed. According to him, many people have already died as a result of the war in Ukraine and the Middle East, and the time has come to stop this conflict. Trump also said that if the US presidential election were held in 2025, World War III could start under Biden. However, he is convinced that this will not happen if he is president. Trump also thanked Saudi Arabia for hosting the meeting between the US and Russia, but called Volodymyr Zelensky a successful comedian and a dictator without elections. Recently, an image of Trump with a crown on his head appeared on the White House website, along with the caption, "Long live the King." Russia is expected to attack NATO countries in the near future. Moscow is expected to launch an attack from the Baltic states. It is not excluded that the first target will be Estonia. European countries must join the war against Russia with their forces, as it will be extremely difficult for Ukraine to hold the eastern flank of Europe. A veteran of the Russian-Ukrainian war, Major Reserve of the National Guard of Ukraine, Oleksiy Hetman, shared his opinion with Espresso TV. It is obvious that for many countries, the end of the war means Ukraine's capitulation and relief. But Putin will try to attack other European countries. It is strange that the Polish foreign minister speaks on behalf of all of Europe regarding sending troops to Ukraine. The British, the Baltic states, and France are not opposed and are considering these issues. The Poles are not holding the eastern flank. We are doing it for all European countries, he stated. If Europe does not assist Ukraine in this war, it risks losing its own territories. Should Ukrainians fail to sustain the defense, Russia may attempt to attack a NATO country. There were calculations that the Russians might conduct a local war in about 6 months. Most likely, it will be a Baltic country. It could be Estonia, particularly Narva. Little green men could enter there. In this way, Russia will test NATO's Article 5 response, Hetman noted. From an economic perspective, the European Union is as powerful as China or the United States. When comparing gross domestic product, the EU, the US, and China produce roughly the same amount of goods and services. The EU's capabilities are just as significant as those of the US, as emphasized by the Reserve Major of the National Guard. The war is taking place in Europe, and the greatest danger lies with European countries. There is a need to establish something akin to a European NATO. President Zelensky proposed the creation of a unified EU armed forces, which is not a new idea. Discussions on this topic have been ongoing for several years. The proposal triggered a nervous response from the Poles, who asserted that it would not happen. They understand very well that if a unified armed force is created, Ukraine will take the leading role. However, every country must be responsible for itself, and there needs to be more modesty in the statements. He added,